is an interesting and a simple topic to talk on, as long as you don't get invited to the same forum in future. Right? And the interesting thing about today is that, like no other time, business models are getting questioned. Like no other time in the past, HR models are getting questioned. All of you have gone through the process of adopting and then de-adopting forced ranking, and there is a huge clamor to be on this camp or that camp, depending on what is the flavor at any point in time. Netflix is an organization which is in the news. Many years back, their head of HR, Patty McCord, and the CEO came up with something called as the culture deck of Netflix. Was downloaded 11 million times. Not because it was a fancy PowerPoint presentation, it was a very, very simple bullet point kind of a presentation. Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, said this is the most important document to have ever come out of the valley. Just to quote one line from that document, which was featured as a case study by Harvard Business Review, adequate performance deserves a generous severance package. Like that, they had a set of rules, and one of the rules was adequate performance deserves a generous severance package. The co-author of that document, Patty McCord, a few years back, hopefully got a generous severance package because she had to leave the organization. She is a successful consultant. So for those of you who are from HR, be very careful about how you are trying to shape the future and what policies you are going to put in place, because they may come back to bite you at some point in time. Having said that, at Great Place to Work Institute, one of the things that we do is constantly ask organizations, particularly the best workplaces, on what do they see in future, because we believe that employees have a big role to play because they see the future ahead of sometimes of the senior management. And there are 5 or 6 things which are pretty clear that's going to happen. So if you invite me 10 years from now, and if you are recording this, I'll be happy to come back and revisit that recording. So what are those things? A, the big fat organization, will it survive? When I say big fat organization, I mean in terms of number of employees. Retail is people-specific, huge numbers. But just to give you a perspective, in 1962, AT&T, their valuation was in comparable dollar terms about 2/3 that of Google. And they employed 15 times more number of employees. So we thought that that model has disappeared in the West, but it is rising in countries like ours, where we will have retail, IT, for example, TCS, Cognizant, Wipros are going to keep on adding and adding manpower, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, not anymore. So those organizations, net of attrition, are not growing. Their profits are still growing, and I'll explain in a minute why it is happening. But interestingly, only 44% of people, according to a PwC research that they did globally, 44% of young people really want to work in a very big, large organization. Unlike in the past, these organizations still promise certain degree of job security, pension benefits, etc. The second important reason why some of these organizations will still be powerful and some of them will continue to make money is technology. So the way technology is shaping, for example, anybody who visits US would know that if you are going to a local airport, you don't see people right up to the security check. If you are in many of those departmental chains, you don't see too many people, right? And a lot of things you can do yourself, and those things may or may not happen in India as fast, but technology is really making a big difference. I remember Henry Ford way back in the 50s was taking a round of his shop floor at Cleveland along with the head of the United Auto Workers, a guy called Walter Reuther. and they had introduced the first mechanized robots, and pointing to those robots, Henry Ford said to Walter, saying that, Walter, what are you going to do? Because these guys, they are not going to pay your union dues. What's going to happen to you? And Walter replied, Mr. Ford, what's going to happen to you? They're not going to buy your cars either. So therefore, technology is a double-edged sword. As we reduce manpower, we increase profitability. So the cost of staff cost has reduced over a period of time. In the US for sure, it has, but profits have not reduced. You are also decreasing the rate of increase in the consuming middle class, which is a bit of an issue for a country like India, where you need a bigger consumer class for the economy to grow. The third important thing is analytics is changing the way we do work. And Nagesh mentioned something very interesting. In a retail chain, this is a real case study, which is in South Mumbai. The salary that you pay to frontline staff is bare minimum salary, so therefore you get people from outskirts of Mumbai. When we did that study, we found that if it takes more than 1 hour to reach that store, your engagement level is lower by 10 percentage points. Doesn't matter what you are doing at the store to improve engagement. And then we said, hey, this is an HR's way of looking at it. Do we have data of sales per employee? Thankfully, the counter records which employee has made what kind of sale, and we found that there is a distinct correlation between sales, per capita sales, and engagement level of the employee. And then we said, can you make a mathematical model and tell us, if we were to increase salaries by 2,000 rupees, what would that mean that you get more people from catchment area, and does it mean that engagement will go up, and does it mean that sales will go up, and can we pay for it? So analytics is going to be very, very important, even more. And the last 2 points before I get back to the panel and ask them for the kind of challenges that they are facing, the last 2 points would be that with millennials coming in, what is the expectation going to be? Right? I was in a campus placement a few days back, and the student asked me, sir, if you don't mind, can I ask you a question? I said, yes, please ask. He said, in your glass door there is this comment. Can you explain? I have never visited Glassdoor for my own organization. I have no idea who has made that comment. A colleague of mine was very smart. They said, no, this is a comment about our US business, not about the India business, and something to that effect. We came back and we said, this is not done. We have an internal employee survey. All our people managers get feedback every quarter. I want to put it up on my website. If you want to make judgments about my company, you might as well make judgments based on credible, authentic data and not random comments that somebody is making in some site. They're going to make it anyway. So therefore, if you can't beat them, you have to join them. So therefore, what would be your response to millennials and their expectation and transparency that they demand is going to be very, very interesting for organizations so far who are used to saying, oh, Prasanjit, I know 791 companies have done your survey, but we are right now not ready. We don't want to find out. You don't say that to customers. We don't want to find out what our customers are saying because we are not ready. But you seem to do that with employees. The last point is HR ready. Is HR ready for the future? And that point I'm not going to answer right now, but I have some specific views, but I would like to also throw it open to the panel. And the first thing that I would start by asking the panel, and maybe we can go round robin on this, and I will start with you, Kailash. When we talk about building future-ready workplaces, what do we see as the top 3 challenges for your business? And in the second round, we'll pick up some of those challenges and ask a few questions and also give an opportunity for the audience.
Thanks, Prasanjit. I think if I have to put challenges, 3 challenges, I would say the first, second, and third is actually one challenge, is to change the mindset of the organization. Typically what happens is that every organization works in a particular manner and believes that only one thing that we do is that's the right way to do it. And if you know the reality, and Nagesh kind of stressed a lot in terms of what's the reality of life vis-a-vis what are we doing. Once you start looking at the reality and you decide that you have to change, and otherwise your organization will not exist, the mindset change, I think, is going to be the top one or two things that we need to do, especially at the senior levels, more so than what the mid or the junior levels that is required. The second, from a mindset change, I just wanted to share an anecdote because you talked about millennials. Finally, what do? We essentially come to you and say that please invest for your future. And what is the millennial wanting to do? He wants to go to the stores in the mall or do shopping online and spend money. He doesn't want to save, he or she doesn't want to save money. So what essentially, if I go to them with a proposition which says that cut down 2 parties, don't see one movie less in a month, they are just not even going to be listening to me because I'm going against their very DNA. So how can we get the messaging to the customer basis what the customer needs? And I think that was one of the key messages that Nagesh said. Because in the past, I used to go with a small presentation which says that, if you cut down and you save 5,000 rupees of spend every month and invest that 5,000 rupees over a period of 10 years, you can make so much money. That worked very well 10 years ago. That spiel cannot work today. If I talk to my nieces who are like in the early 20s, they laugh at me. They actually tell me, they say, Mama, you want us to cut down on party? You must be crazy. So that's the truth. Listening to the customer, hearing the voice of the customer, and then designing your policies to match that, I think is a big challenge that all organizations face.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Hassan.
Good morning, Nagesh, panel members, and ladies and gentlemen. I believe as a leader, my role is to teach my team to continuously upgrade their skills, to learn, for them to learn, to dance to forms of music that have not yet been created. And I think that's really the VUCA moment that Nagesh was talking about. The biggest challenge for us as leaders, be it CEOs or HR or the team that's sitting behind, is how do we prepare our employees to handle situations which probably are now black swans. And black swans used to happen once in a decade. Now black swans are happening probably once a month. So to me, that's the biggest challenge that we as leaders face. If I have to break it down, I think one of the other challenges that we'll all need to kind of understand and try and grapple with as an organization is to understand the expectations of this new generation. My company, that is Eureka Forbes, we did a quick survey of kids studying in 10th, 12th and graduation, and we limited it to that. And we asked them what's the kind of environment that they're looking at when they get into workplaces. It was very interesting. They said it must have a nap corner. I repeat, a nap corner, a corner that they can take a midday sleep or a nap. It took me some time to swallow that, yeah. I had to ask the team to relook at the raw data and then chew it up again. Yes, sir, people have said they want to have a corner in the office where they can take a nap in the middle of the day. That's what I meant in terms of having to teach them to learn to dance to forms of music that have never been created. The other second big challenge that I see for all of us as leaders is managing this age conflict, this mindset conflict. We have people in the organization who've been there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They have very rich experience, and there's no question about it. And maybe my gray hairs might make me sound a bit biased. But the fact remains that there is a value to the experience. But there's also tremendous value to this new generation, which Nagesh so aptly described, the 4 years old, the 15s and the 16s. Because they're going to be bringing in stuff which the new age consumer is going to be talking. So I think the challenge that my organization and all our organizations will continuously face is under one roof, how do we manage the elders or the aged employees who have the experience and this new young budding employees bring that to the table. And neither of them should get either driven away or stifled. And to me, the last one, which is probably the most important, is this whole business today of retail is becoming an omni-channel. Yeah, so it's not about shopping online or shopping offline. It's not about shopping in a modern retail organization, a modern retail format like Chroma, or going to a mom and pop store, Mavi steel appliances, or going on Flipkart. It's doing everything at the same time. It's shopping all the time, wherever. In an organization like Eureka Forbes, we have multiple verticals. So there's a vertical that handles the e-com, there's a vertical that handles the modern trade, there's a vertical that handles distribution. Now each of the business heads, the kind of stress levels that they are getting into, because of this continuous channel conflict that's emerging due to omni-channel, market operating prices are dropping, there's burning, there's discounting. I think the biggest challenge that's facing us as an organization on this particular point is we can't recruit for IQ anymore. I think IQ is an old word, right? Can we recruit for EQ? Not anymore. I think EQ has become obsolete. I think the buzzword is AQ. That's the adversity quotient. And I think to create a future-ready organization, we need to focus on recruiting people who have high adversity quotients, who can manage this omni-channel conflicts to take it forward. With this, I'd like to say that at the end of the day, we need to continuously as an organization keep it future-ready, is to destroy, I repeat, continuously destroy to recreate. Thank you.
Thanks, Aslam. And Kailash and Aslam has the benefit of heading businesses, and one of the things that Kailash had said, which I'm going to come back to him later, is the mindset change. He also talked about employees and customer, and I think a huge mindset change is, if you have to win in the market for talent like you want to win in the market for customers, can you have a mindset that says employee is as important as the customer? I call it employees equal to customer, and I'll come back to you, Kailash, on the traditional organizations, and you are part of it, or a group which is a traditional and successful group. How difficult is it to bring about that mindset in managers? Aslam, for years we have been impressed by the sales force of Eureka Forbes. The guys who come in a motorcycle with that uniform, you may like them, you may dislike them, you can't ignore them, right? With the tie. And these are like, it's almost a cult kind of a following. And all of a sudden comes Hema Malini and Kent on the other side, maybe a different sort of business model. I don't know much about it, So I want to ask you later in the second round, when business models change, what is a significant, big competitive advantage having hundreds and thousands of salespeople on one hand and somebody who spends hundreds of crores in advertising and therefore creating a pull? How does one react? And you refer to it in terms of the omni-channel challenges. I'll come back to the challenge of business models changing and how does an organization, a leader, adapt to that. Very interesting for us is in Deepak we have somebody who is both business and HR. In fact, he himself is probably confused whether he is a business or HR. And last week, Indo-American Chamber of Commerce had invited me, and the CEO of a company called Teleperformance was there. And he said something very interesting, and I wrote it down somewhere. He said that you don't have to be a functional expert to be the head of HR, but you have to be an HR expert to be a head of any function. Right, and this was his way, a very interesting way of putting it. That and Teleperformance has done some work in that area. So over to you, the top 3 challenges from your perspective in your organization.
Good morning, everyone. Normally you leave the best for the last, but I think today we started with the best. So after Nagesh, I don't think anybody speaking will make too much sense here. I'll be very contextual to the challenges of my organization and how we're going to, how we're looking at handling them, and hopefully it'll be useful for all of you. We as a company have grown very fast in the last 7 years. We probably give the largest number of loans in India today across financial institutions and banks. Okay, one output of that is we today are present in 400 locations. We have branches in 400 locations, and we serve another 100 locations. Over the next 3 years, we will be in about 2,000, 2,500 locations, serving another further 1,500 to 2,000 locations. A core which has built us in the last 7 years, and something we pride ourselves on, is being bureaucracy-less and being agile. Now, if you want to operate in 2,500 locations, on paper you start putting down how you're going to manage this, what are going to be the structures, what are going to be the mechanisms. And we've been doing this for the last 6-7 months because I'm looking at a version 2 of HR. And everything I did, I came up with only one answer, which was bureaucracy, bureaucracy, bureaucracy. Slow down, slow down, slow down. You do that, we're not the organization which has made us what we are. Okay? So I think the challenge of being able to operate in India as a truly diverse company across thousands of locations would require a very, very different way of training people, engaging people, exciting people, and importantly also governing people. So that's one challenge which we are working on right now. The second challenge is true, I'm sure, for all companies. Customers today, even employees now, customers come and say, which button do I press to get what I want? Right? Then gone are the days of going, looking at something, evaluating something, filling a form, submitting something. Okay, let's say in our type of business, which is the lending business, you wanted a loan, let's say you have 3 crores for a housing loan, you would go submit your bank statement, submit your income papers, blah, 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 and then somebody would process it, some 200 people would come and trouble you and visit you, harass you, and then give you some loan. You say you're approved as if you're doing a favor, we're approving a loan, and then you say this is the rate of interest. It's a long, huge process, right? The business model now is customer says, which button do I press, right? He's not saying which button do I press to apply or get information. He says which button or 1, 2, 3 buttons do I press and loan amount is credited into my bank account. That's it. I'm not going to give you anything. I'm only going to press a button. Okay? Now that's what digital is doing to us. It is analytics, technology, that's what digital is doing to us. It's completely disrupting roles. Roles are disappearing. Okay? I'll give you a small example. In any one of our branches, typically, we used to have a sales guy, we used to have an operations team, we used to have a, let's say, underwriting team, and we used to have an operations team. Underwriting team, gone. Operation team, gone. Sales team is doing probably 10 times the productivity of what previously people used to do. Right? When roles disappear like this, the completely different types of roles get created, how you're going to manage the workforce. If you don't constantly do something, you're left with a workforce which is one completely unskilled, demotivated, and then they become redundant. Okay? And on the other side, we keep struggling with not enough talent, not enough talent, not enough talent. Front-end guys, more and more is getting loaded onto them, absolutely, as Nagesh said. They are managing 5 metrics, 6 metrics, they are managing 20 metrics. Roles in corporate office are all moving away from these command structures. They are becoming capability building roles, capability building roles. Middle management is completely shrinking. When this is constantly happening, I think there's a thinking for us, how do we manage this? We're going to accelerate, it's going to come down. So how are we going to manage this? A third challenge, I think, is we learning to truly work with a democratized workforce. Now, I think all of us in the room say, yeah, we're democratic, we do it, but traditional way of how HR operates is I know all. I am HR. I am HR, so you do it. I know what you want. I create the best for is the most undemocratic function to me in any company. Right? How do you truly value a democratic workforce? Knowledge is now democratized. Views are democratized. Wants are democratized. Right? When everything to do with an employee is democratized, a one-size-fits-all approach and I know everything and they're expecting the employee to follow what you want to do just because you're HR, I think those days are gone. If they are gone, what's the alternate model? No, these are three challenges that we as an organization are working on at this point of time. It's very exciting, but quite a challenge.
I think that's a great insight, Deepak. And two questions that I have in my mind, which I come back to you, would be: A, how do you manage the workforce for tomorrow? Because some of us are not even visualizing what is that workforce for tomorrow. I just came back from McDonald's and they're very clear that for me, my workforce could be anyone, somebody who wants to work for 3 hours a day, somebody who wants to work for 3 days a week, somebody wants to take off for 2 months to prepare for an exam and then maybe come back, and I have a model that fits in all of those people in a manner which is win-win for business as well as for the employee, right? The second question that I'm going to ask you would be the change in role of HR. And from traditional HR, people who have come up the traditional way, who were taught labor laws and policies 20 years back. And I believe one of the biggest challenges that we have is 20 years back, people like us did research and we identified the manager as the key driver of engagement of people. Now when you look at the millennials today, that was fine for an organization with hierarchy, command control, the manager had power, balance of power was with the manager, you didn't have supply, demand was very different from what it is today. That has become the most disempowering assumption when you have a whole bunch of Gen Y and millennials coming in today, where they know that I'm going to change my manager or my job anyway, if I don't like it, then might I not as well take accountability for my engagement instead of depending on the manager? How is the role of HR going to change in context of all of this? So Ashutosh, great case study. Marico, of course, is known for innovation. It's a great case study of an organization who are fighting with many others, far bigger multinationals, but are leveraging the kind of strengths that they have. So this is a business transformation case study which is impossible without people dimension playing a very important role. So for an organization like yours, top 3 challenges.
Thanks, Balaji. We have a board member already here, so in case I don't cover, Nagesh can fill in. So if I look at it, and especially with what I've heard with Nagesh, actually brought in amazing insights, in fact, a lot of points to work on, and after hearing most of you here, what I'm seeing is one challenge continues to be there, okay? It may be in the past, present and the future is, how do we continuously win with our consumers? We are an FMCG, so we have customers, which is largely our associates, like distributors and others. And third, the talent. So that reality continues, that's not going to go anywhere. What has been good for us as an organization, we are a 26-year-old organization, and the core tenets of the organization, which were built on early responsibility and empowerment, mutual trust and respect, really have made us good. And when you say it's an innovative organization, it is because these values, which were there right from the beginning, have actually allowed us to constantly adapt and win. We are one of the very few organizations who across this span of 26 years has actually looked at values as drivers for business. So many times we come across organizations where people who say that, okay, values are there upon a wall, but what gets practiced is different. But we are an organization who has put in a lot of emphasis on values, and 3 times is when we have refined our values. Now this is a very strong statement because people tend to say that, okay, once you've taken values, you don't change them. But we are an organization who has constantly looked into the future and identified what should be our beliefs and principles to continuously win in the future as well. And that's where we have found a lot of strength coming from our core beliefs and principles. And this is not something which HR does, this is something which the entire organization, the leadership, including our board gets involved and gives us inputs. And that has helped us very good. Now looking into the future, what are the challenges? I think a lot has been said about VUCA. And the expectation is that uncertainty part of VUCA, which is very much there, the expectation is how do you deal it with certainty? And that's very paradoxical, because there is going to be uncertainty. Now, if you look at it within that, and if I were to look at it from a leadership role, what is very imperative for us is how do we build capability which is ahead of the curve, so that our business model, which requires a repeatable business model, is intact. So capability, and if you really look at this dimensions of capability, what we are seeing is all majority of the paradigms have been broken. So, for example, business models have been broken. A brick-and-mortar shop today has been broken by digital. Okay, leadership has been broken. For example, in the past, we always expected leadership is something that starts around 40 plus. What we are finding is there are youngsters just out of campuses starting startup businesses and actually leading teams, or some of them have employees which are more than even our employees, number of employees. So the entire paradigm of leadership has broken. Third, the entire paradigm of employment has broken. In fact, more and more people are coming and saying that we don't want a job, and I think Nagesh beautifully captured it, that do you have assignments? Do you have projects? Because that's what we want. Our attention spans are limited, we recognize that. So give us something in a limited span and we'll do it. So the model of employment has changed. Now, while all these changes are happening, ultimately the business is going to require capability to win. Now, how does one design that capability proactively so that wherever the future needs comes in, one is able to deal with it with certainty? The third part which comes in here is careers. Now, the aspirations of people have changed. Originally, people were chasing titles. Originally, people were chasing stature. People were also chasing remuneration packages. But often what we are seeing is people are coming and saying, do you have work which is meaningful? Do you have something which can help me impact society at large? Do you have something which it can have my signature that this is done by me? So that's the other aspect. Now, business is demanding capability. Members, or we call our employees, members are demanding, have aspirations. Now the role of HR here, which becomes very challenging, and which I call as, how do you create the marriage between capability for business and careers for members? Because careers are not going to be in terms of years, they are not going to be in terms of tenure. Careers are going to be in terms of meaningful output, meaningful projects. So these are the things which are hitting us. And while all this is happening, the dominant motivating force, which is the leadership, actually is facing a lot of paradoxes. Now, how do you build a leadership which can manage those multiple paradoxes? And we call it as polarities. So while there is long term, there is short term. And like Nagesh said, you may have a 2020, but how many of you are going to deliver your third quarter and how? So is it versus short term versus long term, or is it an and? We speak about empowerment, people want to experiment, people want to take risks, but at the same time, people also want a safety net. So as a leader, how are you going to allow people to fail or experiment and fail? At the same time, how are you going to also ensure that even if they fail, they're going to be the organization? So leadership, how is it going to deal with this polarity? Because that's very difficult. And there is one certain aspect of mindset, because we have grown with a certain experience which has influenced our beliefs and mindset. How do you constantly challenge that mindset, change that mindset? That's something which is hitting us very hard.
Thanks, Ashutosh. I think one of the things which you are going to be very competent in terms of talking about, and I'll come back to you with that question, is how does the role of HR change with the business model of the organization? So traditional large organizations who are known for producing leaders, so HR plays a role of, let us say, critical role in talent management. How do I, give career opportunities, build a leadership pipeline? But increasingly, organizations who are fighting established players, they want to build a very strong employer brand, where the key role of HR is actually to build a brand which is going to attract people and give them the feeling, not just the feeling, give them the opportunity to make a real difference. So the product manager at Marico making a real difference versus doing paperwork and stuff like that. So now over here, so HR very clearly says like a body shop. You have Gaia as another business, where we are saying that we want to position ourselves very differently. We are mission centric. We are going to give meaning to your jobs, and therefore employer brand becomes more important than even traditional talent management and assessment and stuff like that. And then there is a third kind of organization which is completely project based, where you actually depend on people who are going to come and do great jobs in projects, and maybe even some retail companies like Domino's Pizza, etc. could have a workforce which will keep coming and going. So how does HR play that role in making sure that you do a good job of procurement, right? So I think that's something we would like to understand in future. How can HR's role be aligned to the business model of the organization as opposed to playing the same standard role in different organizations, right? So coming back, Kailash, the question that I had in my mind was, for large traditional organizations, I know you are in financial services, which is very different from a larger group context. One of the big challenges that we have in leadership teams is that even though we pay lip service why people are most important and my biggest assets walk in and walk out every day and so on and so forth, the reality is when it comes to customers, everybody from the CEO downwards will jump and address that issue. When it comes to employees, for example, we customize for customers. I don't know, you probably would have standard products, but within that you will do some customization for customers. How often do we customize for employees? How is that mindset going to happen?
So you're 100% right when you say that. The difference is, that let's assume that the organization is at an inflection point. And when the organization is at an inflection point and we need to take certain decisions so that we can really build a very strong future. And here I'm talking from an employee perspective also, because if the organization is going downhill, no employee really has a great future. Earlier, the strategy or the decision to do what next would get really taken amongst the top senior most management. And then it would be said that this is what we want to do and this is we are executing it. Today, I don't think that's the case. Okay? So today, engaging the employee from why we are doing it, what is the need for change, why certain tough decisions have to be taken, you need to engage them. You need to show them the picture. You can't just say this is it, because today's employee questions a lot of things. So let's assume that you got the top management and they got the next 100 important employees and then they have their various teams. It becomes very important to build an engagement for showing them the reason why these steps are being taken. When you are able to do, and this is transparency, it has nothing else but to do with transparency. The moment you bring about transparency in the organization, employees start believing that their concerns are getting heard and addressed. So different employees, different departments will have different concerns. And that's where really the point that you're making, from being a very traditional organization where you say, this is how we will do it and then you just execute it, to really explaining the rationale behind it is really one of the important things for employees today. And I completely agree with you that we need to treat employees as well as customers, because actually they are the first point of promoting that this is a great organization to be with, and they are the ones who get the next 10 guys coming into the organization. So you don't need to then spend on different means to get people or attract people to the organization. If all your policies and processes are transparent, your promotion policies are transparent, no employee is going to come to you and say, I've completed 3 years in the organization, now it's time for me to move from assistant manager to deputy manager. So today we are saying that, boss, if you want to move a level, you need to take on an enhanced role when these are the roles which are fitting into these levels. So do you have the skill set to take on that role, or the good employees, can we train them to get into that skill set? I think that's where people start believing that this is not an organization which says, chalo 3 saal ho gaya, 5 saal ho gaya, isko promotion dena padega, nahi to wo nikal jayega, which was the very traditional way of looking at it. So I think all of us have to move in that direction, and we've started that work. And the challenge is that you need to involve everyone.
Yeah, and one of the very important things which you have said, and we are seeing this, for example, the technical term is mass career customization. So some of you would have seen that. Gone are the days when we say, these are the 3 career paths for you. When you want to buy a phone in the market, the shopkeeper will ask you, what is your budget, what are the features you want, right? What features do you want and what is the price you're willing to pay? And organizations are moving in that direction. When you want a career, we are going to ask you, okay, you want a high-speed career, you want to be a functional head at a particular age, what is the price you are willing to pay? And very often, the organizations didn't know how to give that accelerated career, and they did not know what price to ask for. And we are basically, I think, talking about treating employees as consumers, and therefore people may decide not to pay the price and be still comfortable with something which is not as accelerated, but do they have those models available internally in the organization, just like our customers have multiple models available?
Just quickly give you an example, real life example which we underwent. Recently, some of you may have read, we underwent a major restructuring around 6 months back. We actually decided to bring down our product lines from our 17 odd product lines to 7 in the lending business. Obviously, that calls for a massive overhaul of the way the organization is structured, as well as the way the organization is going to run in the future. Now, just imagine, had we not involved the core group of people to explain the rationale, what could have happened? And it was executed, I think, in a lightning speed of 3 months. We are BAU in 3 months, despite doing such a major overhaul in the organization. I think that is testimony to the fact that you need to get people involved in decision making and the buy-ins that are there. And it's very, very tough to do that, let me tell you. Because if you're going to take tough decisions, and Indians by nature, we have been brought up on the dharma, be nice to everyone and everything. This essentially goes against the principles that we have been born and brought up with right from childhood. So then, to take those, but you know that this is being done in the interest of the survival or the future or betterment of the organization, I think people start accepting it.
Okay, so I'm told that we have limited time. So can you ask somebody to correct that clock, because I've been... Yes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is do a quick lightning round, and then we are going to ask for 1 or 2 questions. So quick question to you is, what happens when the business model changes?
So you mentioned Hema Malini.
Yes.
10 years ago, Hema Malini threatened the turf of Aquaguard, which was created by door knocks. So there was no retail presence of Aquaguard in India. It was sold only by man with the tie at the back. I still remember my interview with the current executive vice chairman, Mr. Goklani. I was in Philips those days, and he asked me, why are you joining here? Why do you want to come here and join? Probably answers the question. I said, I want to try and create something in this organization which doesn't exist. So this is what I said: create another organization within Eureka Forbes. And I think credit to the company, we've actually been able to create a retail environment within a direct sales organization. And just to give a number, 10 years ago, the retail business was less than 2% of our B2C. Today it is 40%, and the growth has been 13 times. So I think it's a case study in itself of how does one reinvent the entire business model to take on not just MMR, but a host of others.
So that would be a brilliant case study, the second one in Harvard Business Review, because I know they published one already. So Deepak, yes, absolutely. Deepak, very quickly, we had talked about two things. One was we had said that what kind of workforce you will have in future, and also from your perspective as line manager and HR, how do you see role of HR changing? So maybe you can take any one of these two questions.
I'll take two very quickly. First, digital change, all that constant, everything moving everywhere. The key thing, I think, career paths days are gone. Okay, you don't know what the career path is, how do you train for a career path, how do you build for a career path. Okay, so I think that it's learning which will determine career path. So learning cannot be taken for chance. Okay, now two things we are doing is one, I'm just we are going live with something called a DMS. It's like development management system. It's normally always mixed with the performance management system, and whether we like it or not, let's face it, 90% is performance management, 10% naam ke liye tick mark daalte hain. Okay, so but I'm not leaving it a chance. Two different platforms, a performance management system, a decision management system, running on two different complete cycles where where learning will be measured. Okay, can I be measured at the end of the year what my learning was for the year, and so what do I do for my self-learning, and what does the organization do? Can you measure it? We come from a simple philosophy: if you can measure, whatever you measure gets done. So can you measure learning of an employee during the year? And that will automatically take care of everything, and that will be the input into the learning academy we're starting up. Second, on HR, I talked to my team a little short while ago on my thoughts on this, half my team threatened to resign. I believe HR, the way we are, is a flawed model. Okay. If you look at various different functions in a company, okay, you look at a marketing function, you look at a technology function, you look at, let's say in the lending industry, you look at a risk function, they create a set of horizontal capabilities. Then businesses go to them and say, we need this. You develop it and you hand it over to business, and business runs it. In HR team determines what is best for employees. HR team determines what are the capabilities required. We build the capabilities and then we operate the capabilities. I think it's completely wrong, and that's why the distance between an employee believing that HR is bureaucratic, doesn't understand business, is because of this. That we're moving towards that. So HR role to me is HR which should govern and not do. Okay, businesses, all of us say, businesses know people best. When they know it best, let them manage. What role? Why should we be there in between? Because act as as we know all and create models. But you need to govern, and it's not an easy thing to do, which means you need a whole set of digital decision-making systems. You enter, you get decision support systems, and then what do? Deviation. Deviation kiske paas aata? HR ke paas. Deviations go to business, you do only exception reporting. HR should be nowhere in between. Right? You only govern, and through governance you actually get control rather than doing and losing complete control. Last bit on employee, we have all talked about enough about employee. I'm working on something now. In 6-12 months we'll implement. Anything to do in the company, there'll be no mail. Mail is not allowed as a challenge again. Anything to do with HR, nothing can be, not a single mail be given either for hiring or for induction or for engagement or for anything. No mails. Okay, a completely digital world. Okay, is what we have to do. I'm staffing a customer experience officer. So we have mapped about 160 different touch points, get real-time feedback through whatever, to 10 different modes, from a simple SMS to a weekly to a survey, whatever. Get feedback, have a moving NPS score, okay, like a customer. So don't do a one-time survey. One-time survey is good to measure long-term culture movement. On every single process, do a NPS, which comes real-time feedback you get. It's a moving NPS, so you know how the process is being viewed by employees, and an overall NPS, and every touch point which I talked about, employees have the chance to socially comment on it. I mean, not just come in, to engage on every single touch point. Automatically, HR processes what is working, what is not working, what you have to do gets taken care of.
Related to what Nagesh was saying is that this is continuous process as opposed to year-end process. So I don't know. I think your timer fooled us actually, and we thought we had far more time than what we had. So do we have 5 minutes for a couple of questions after we get Mariko to wrap up? Your Ashutosh, your concluding comments on business model and role of HR.
Okay, I'll keep it short and I'll not get to the HR part. Okay. We don't want another heated conversation coming up in terms of questions. But I'll allude to the part you talked about employer branding and the other parts. I'll keep it short and specific. We defined a talent value proposition way back, and it's very simple. It is something which is appealing, which is a commitment, which is a promise to the talent we hire, and it is the talent we have internally, which is challenging, enriching, and fulfilling roles. And this is what we will give the talent who is with us and the talent who we want to have with us. And the entire design of our HR processes, the way a member experiences the business also through these processes, has to qualify for all these three. What we also found is that when attrition happens, typically is when this value proposition, this promise does not hold good. And when this promise comes back again, people come back to us. So our talent, if I look at it in terms of managers and above talent, almost 10% of our talent, and in fact it's a higher number than 10, is ex-Mariconians. So we have people who would go back and come back also because of this promise. And the entire work goes around that. We are a flat organization, so that helps us also to design roles which are enriched. We can't offer grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 5 notional promotions. Roles have to be enriched. The second part is, we were one of the organizations who early on, around 10 years back, defined a purpose as to what will this organization have in terms of meaningfulness. Our purpose is that whoever we touch, be it an employee, be it a consumer, be it any of our associates, be it any other stakeholders, we will maximize their potential. So if a consumer is buying a product, that means it will add something to the consumer in terms of their potential. If we are going to work with a vendor, we will ensure that the vendor gives the best productivity, because working with Mariko, that person learns as to how good practices are, best practices are. So this purpose has become a very strong thing for us to hold on. So it is working. To give you a quick instance, Saffola, which is one of our flagship brands, works on healthcare, and the statistics show that 1 out of 4 persons in India has cardiac problems. Now for the brand manager, when you ask him what is his or her motivation, they say, even if I'm able to reduce this statistic and make it 1 out of 5, I've done a great job. Now that's the power of a purpose. Now you're not talking packages, you're not talking titles and all, but you're saying this is the kind of work you will be doing through your brand, that's how it holds. So these are the kind of value propositions we put forward to our people so that they give their best to the organization, and they do best as well.
Absolutely, and this is the difference between the green world and the blue world if you read that PwC report. One question, whoever jumps up first and asks that question will be a lucky person. So yes, please, madam, can you stand up and so that we can see you, and just give us your name, organization, and ask the question.
So good morning. My name is Dr. Sapna Modi. I am from ITM Business School. This question is to Mr. Ashutosh. Sir, what I have understood is we are all talking about value-driven organizations, and as it comes to me, appears to me about the discussion is that it is important for organizations to be value-driven. When we talk from customers' point of view, value is equal to benefit by cost. Benefit is both functional as well as the emotional benefit. Obviously, functional benefit when you are into FMCG can be proven by the product itself or the services that you are offering. But how about the emotional quotient of a customer? So I want to understand, in a digital world where the interaction is very remote between the organization and the customer, how this particular challenge of capturing to the emotional quotient is being catered by the organization. Because obviously if you don't capture to that emotional quadrant of a customer, you won't get brand loyalties. And you just spoke about Saffola, right? Obviously there might be brand loyals to Saffola, but there are also competitors which are available. So how is the organization working towards it in this digital world? This is my question.
So when I meant values, I meant as the softer dimensions. When you're meeting value, you're meeting as the value proposition to a consumer.
Exactly.
Actually, for an FMCG company to win, what you said has to be done. So for example, even when a person is opening a bottle, product is understood as the oil inside that bottle or that jar. But the experience of opening that bottle, ensuring that the bottle when you pour does not leak afterwards. Okay? The packaging is such that it can be kept properly in a kitchen shelf, which have a certain heights. Those things also need to be paid attention when you design a product. It's not only the oil that goes into the product. So that's very important. The second is in the digital world, what we are also recognizing is that the experience in which the product reaches the consumer, that also is important. You don't want to have a person getting a product in a disheveled manner. You don't want it to make it difficult for the consumer to go and buy a product. Okay, so those things also play. In fact, in the marketing function, there are newer skills which have come, which also work on sensorials. So when I open a product, what kind of fragrance do I get? What kind of an aroma do I get? What are the colors associated with it? All those goes into it. Ultimately, there are certain products like what you said, Saffola, where the efficacy of the product is also important. Does it really give you that benefit which is promised? So the kind of research that goes into it, the kind of trials that go into it, the kind of effort that goes into it to understand the consumer's lifestyle and then further refine your product also is important. And that's the reason you keep on improving your product. You just don't make a product and sit on it for 5-10 years.
Thank you.
And I think that was a very good question, and the credibility of the company and the emotional relationship also actually leverages digital. So most organizations today are talking about creating communities, right? And therefore you find that people are very loyal to these digital communities, which is another way of even though it is digital, it is actually creating an emotional bond. For that question, Dr. Modi, you get a gift voucher from Max. Can you give a big hand to Dr. Modi? Would you like to come forward and collect this gift voucher so that I'm sorry we ran completely out of time because this timer was showing that we had 20 more minutes when we actually did. But this is a very interesting session, and you can continue the conversation with the rest of the day. Come forward, please. Thank you for your question. And here